Democrat Perspectives. News, interviews, and smart thinking for a better, freer America. Today's Democratic Perspectives host, Cris Lunn, and his guest, JoEtta Brown.
Hi, I'm Cris Lunn. Welcome to Democrat Perspective. Today, our guest is JoEtta Brown.
Good evening, Cris. It's nice to be here.
Hi, JoEtta. I guess my first question is, what is your opinion of the present state budget crisis that Governor Jim Gibbons is so ineffectively orchestrating?
I like that word, ineffective, because as a banker, I see it as a slash and burn way of taking care of a real crisis in the state. I also recognize that Governor Gibbons has projected a 2009 flat budget, which means he's not going to be looking for new sources of revenue, and he will also be making some of the same cuts and maybe at a higher percentage. And Nevada cannot afford to go through that kind of budget crisis again.
How do you see the present state budget crisis as it relates to the national things that are coming down today?
I see it as a warning sign. We really do. Let me go back to the new sources of revenue. We really need to look at that because we can no longer in Nevada rely upon gaming, sales tax, mining, because all of them are down and have changed. So if we don't find new sources of revenue, we won't have the money that we need to run the state. And if you don't have money, everything's affected, and you can see what's happening at the national level. It's a great deal of money, and as a banker, that upsets me because there seems to be a lack of accountability, and that's at the state level as well when it comes to the budget.
Nevada having the highest foreclosure rate in the nation. How does that? How do you see the Assembly being able to address that issue?
Home ownership is the basis of community, or the base of community. And when I was at the bank, we put together a coalition that enabled people to own homes who thought they never would be able to. We placed 10,000 people in homes in the month of April. And I testified before the United States Congress about affordable housing. And I'm very saddened to see that people have to walk away from their homes and leave. In some places throughout our state, there are more than one house that has been left vacant because of foreclosure. And it leads to crime and decay in communities. I think the state needs to put together a group, a coalition, again, of bankers and those that have a direct relationship with housing, and come up with a way that you can help people who are on the verge of foreclosure and who have already lost their homes, so that we can put people back into their homes.
How do you see the fact that 47% of our college attendees never graduate?
I think that should be another red flag, that we have UNR that should be graduating students. I know there's a lack of jobs here in affordable housing. So I think those probably are the two main reasons why students leave. And if we had an educated workforce, we would be easier for businesses to look at Nevada to come here. But if they recognize we cannot provide a workforce, they're going to think about going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. As far as healthcare goes, as we know, I think a recent article in one of the bigger newspapers stated that 1 in 5 Nevadans have no health insurance whatsoever.
I've heard that they are using the emergency rooms in our hospitals, and eventually that it affects all of us. We will pay higher fees for using the emergency when they have been servicing people who don't have any insurance, and then our doctors' fees will also rise. So we need to find at the state level a way to answer that, maybe a state insurance plan, and have, again, a private partnership where people will be able to buy into this, particularly the small businesses. It's mandated that they must provide some sort of health insurance, but when business is down, how do you do that? So we need to find a way to answer that need.
Relative to this present national financial crisis that Phil Gramm and obviously John McCain were partners in, being Phil Gramm being John McCain's major economic advisor, how is it that you see that affecting your position when you are elected to the state assembly? How is that going to dovetail? this crisis that we have between the state and the national.
Make me be very careful, because I lived through, as a banker, the 80s deregulation. And at that time, we really didn't see the long term. Now it's 2008, and it is really frightening to see. You remember, Chris, in the 80s, it was okay to be greedy.
Greed is good.
And that was a lot of the commercials
well.
as well. And Phil Gramm, I understand, most recently wanted to even impose more deregulations on banks, allowing them to do things that was really not their way of work. So having lived through the 80s, I think we're in a really critical time, and it will affect the states, because our banking in Nevada will be affected by further deregulation.
You see that that there is some power that the state of Nevada can exercise through the assembly and the legislature.
Yes, they do, and they must. And that would be one of the things that I would look at.
Would that be a state oversight? How do you see that?
Oversight, checks and balances, more accountability for the banks. I understand that in escrow, under the present administration, the regulations for full disclosure has been changed a lot. And if you don't explain in escrow what you are signing for, what kind of loan you are signing for, it looks great in the beginning. You're getting an ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, at 1%, as an example. But in 6 months, it might be 15%, and I have a minimum wage job. There's no way I'm going to be able to match the increase in my payments, and that's one of the major problems with the foreclosures.
With this kind of increase in state regulation, observation, policing, would it mean increasing state government?
No.
How would that? How would we supply as a state oversight to our banks and our mortgage companies?
There's already entities that are doing that, including the credit cards. We would just be able to put in stiffer, maybe some fines if it wasn't done correctly, some accountability for what's going on in the day-to-day operations.
There's some degree of vigilance, but it's not particularly.
And it could be made stronger.
Being a banker,
yes.
and I know that you were involved in banking during a big bailout. It was what, $500 billion or something in the S&L crisis. How do you feel about this? Them asking for these incredible amounts of money just at the beginning, and we know that if they're asking for $700 billion without any oversight, that it's going to turn into $1 trillion. It already is $1 trillion.
Correct.
Between AIG and Lehman and the bailouts that have already happened, it's going to be $1 trillion.
When I started at the bank, it was under Mark Taper, and he had the old way of doing banking, and that was that home ownership and passbooks were the thing that we should be doing, and not doing some innovative, creative things with the bank's money. So that was ingrained in me as a manager. To hear $700 trillion or $1 billion as a bailout given to whom and for what, there has to be good reasons. This is my tax money and your tax money. Why am I bailing out someone or a company when they should be taken to task as to how did they manage the money? I see it as a lack of management. I also see it beyond a crisis. I think it is just absolutely unbelievable. This wouldn't have happened in the 80s or the 90s, because before deregulations, you were answerable for your investments, not only to the shareholders, but you were also answerable to the federal government. Now it seems like it's a bit too relaxed. That's why we're facing this. And I think something needs to be done in accountability. If this $700 billion is given out, there has to be some checks and balances and some accountability to Congress.
Thank you very much, JoEtta Brown. It's been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Chris. It has. Thank you for asking me.
Democratic Perspectives is presented by the Democrats of Douglas County, Nevada, promoting sensible government for today and tomorrow.